Hi everyone. We are live and we have Nathan. Hey Nathan, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good, good. Do we have everyone that you wanted to be present when you're doing the talk? Anyone for performance? Do you want to anyone?
Looking through the names, I see the majority of the folks I expected. Jesse's off today, so he's not going to be joining, but that's fine.
Okay. We're recording this so that if Jesse wants to take a look later on, he can always do that.
Yep.
Let's wait another 2 minutes just to make sure that everyone wanted to.
Yep, works for me.
All right, we're 5 minutes past the hour, so let's go ahead. Nathan, take it away.
All right. Let me get screen. Okay, that's visible, please.
I can see the screen.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nathan Beittenmiller, and I'm on the performance team with Jesse Hetty. We report to Mike Hopper. Victor Torres is here. He's on our team as well. Today, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to New Relic synthetics. This isn't a super deep technical dive or anything like that, but more of a way to kind of available and get the wheels turning, so to speak. It'll be pretty short and informal, so feel free to chime in with questions in chat or IRC or whatever if you've got any. So to kind of start things off, I want to talk about synthetics in general. New Relic made a wonderful decision when they named their product synthetics because, well, that's kind of what all automated tests are. Synthetic tests are, well, any type of synthetic, an automated test of code site or functionality. There's a lot of different ways that people break them down, and I usually think of them in 3 levels. That'd be unit tests, combination or integration tests, and functional or UI tests. The synthetics we're talking about today are functional tests. They operate at the same level as a user of the system on a complete functionality as a whole, not on the code unit or the method class object level. And there are lots of different types of synthetic tools out there that operate at this level, each kind of with their own pluses and minuses. We'll be talking today about New Relic, but there's also Web Page Test, Lighthouse, GT Metrics, and others. You may have a favorite I haven't named here. There's a lot of them out there. They're all great. They'll do their own things. Synthetic tests are great for monitoring ongoing performance of scripted actions. You can do things like, say, go to Swing, log into it, make sure widgets are loading, and then log out. It goes beyond a basic ping test, and it can help alert you to problems before your users run into them. Similarly, you can monitor API endpoints and validate the data output, not just that it's present, but it's in the right format and that it makes sense and it's valid for what your application is expecting. Synthetics also lets you do some more complex alerting scenarios that I'll kind of get into in a little bit. But for all that, there are a few things that synthetics are not. Synthetics are not a replacement for other testing. Synthetics can eliminate repetitive testing tasks, but they will never, ever replace a good human QA tester. Anyone who tells you that is either misinformed or delusional. Likewise, synthetics are not a replacement for other code tests like unit tests. For one thing, they're more expensive to develop and maintain and can kind of gloss over or mask lower level problems that unit tests could identify. It can identify problems that only manifest in the complete user experience that unit tests won't find. So kind of in other words, they're a tool in your arsenal, but not the only one. And as I mentioned, they're not foolproof or failure-proof, nor are they maintenance-free, as I'll show you here in a bit. They can be hard to develop and maintain, but the trade-off is that you could do a lot more powerful and intelligent things with them if you're willing to go through the effort. And I'm not trying to scare anybody off. They're not that difficult. I'd simply argue that they're more complex than unit tests or manual tests, but they've got a higher ROI in the long run. And so that kind of makes up for it, makes it worth them. So let's dive into New Relic Synthetics specifically. The Synthetics product is built on top of Selenium WebDriver 3.5 with some modifications. There are some new functions that are handy and a few others that I missed, but all in all, it's a solid starting point. Synthetics are driven by Chrome 60 and Node.js 6.11.2. As of today. And you can even import some core and third-party node modules to give you some extra functionality. You know, we're talking stuff, basic things like crypto, Lodash, zlib, and more. It's not as open and flexible as running your own Selenium grid, but you get direct integration into the rest of New Relic in return. So it's kind of a good trade-off. Synthetics can execute directly from data centers across the US and around the globe. This lets you position your tests geographically where it makes sense. So we can put the majority of, say, our AJC tests in the Atlanta data center and give them a similar network time to our market users. Or we can put our WHIO tests in the Columbus data center. Or we can test the user experience for a California user hitting WPXI if we wanted to. We even have a small number of private minions that exist inside the CMG firewall and can test internal Cox resources, which is awesome. However, the poor little minion is kind of overloaded at the moment, so we don't want to give him any more tests until we can get some more minions installed. But you know, I have a request in to do that. The integration with other New Relic products is an important point that I also want to emphasize. New Relic recently released a feature that allows you to directly compare real-time, or rather real user data from the browser module and synthetic data in the same charts. Which is great for helping pinpoint geographic issues or problems and problems that are specific to your synthetic test itself. And this direct integration with New Relic also allows us to leverage its powerful reporting and alerting capabilities that I'll show you here in a moment. Here at CMG, there's really 4 areas where we use synthetics. We use them for monitoring, alerting, debugging, and competitive analysis. Those aren't the only ways you can use synthetic tests, but they give you some ideas and maybe will kind of pique your interest to look into other things. So to kind of start off, there's monitoring. The most simple kind is the simple browser monitor, which, you know, great name. They're basically a ping test in that they connect to a website and they see if it's available. If you want, they can also look for specific text on the page, like a page title. And that's really about it. Nothing fancy. You can't log in or do anything. It just does that. So, you know, if you just want to make sure your page is up, great. There you go. Done. Next up, we've got API monitors. They're designed to connect to an API endpoint and not only verify that it's available, but validate the content as well. We can use these to make sure that, say, for example, the weather feed's contents aren't missing important nodes and that forecasts are up to date. And I can show you a quick example of that if I go to the right browser window, which is over here. Oh, no, sorry, this is the simple monitor. I forgot to jump back to that one. This is a quick one that we have set up on coxmediagroup.com. You can see a whole bunch of different dots here indicating the different data centers it runs from. And if we click on the general here, we can see it's running across the US, except for Columbus, because apparently it's Ohio and we don't like them. I don't know. Runs every 5 minutes, and that's it. We target a URL. There's no other options. We can't do anything else with this monitor. Go over here, we have an API monitor. This is one that we've created specifically for WeatherVane itself in production. You'll notice it also runs pretty frequently, but just from the Atlanta data center. And this one has a script tab here, and we can click on it and see that it actually has a small bit of JavaScript in it. The API tests are also built using Selenium, but they're not really designed for a UI-based experience. They're really designed just for an API. So this one opens up the weather forecast for the 30303 area code. It lets it know that it accepts JSON, and it makes sure that you get a 200 response. It verifies that the output has the city key in it, because if it does not, Method freaks out. And then it has some extra code in here for making sure that the forecast is not more than, say, 4 hours old. I have that commented out at the moment because it's running into a problem where overnight the forecast is well, that was fun feedback. It's commented out because overnight the forecast does get 4 hours out of date, and I kind of got sick of getting called at 4 a.m. for no reason. But that gives you some ideas. Maybe you've got some other things that you'd like to monitor. API monitors can be great for that. And then, for API tests, JSON and text output is the easiest, but you can kind of do more than that, like SOAP or XML, if you want to put in the effort. And last but not least, we have scripted browsers, which is what most people are thinking about for synthetics. These can do everything from basic site functionality to performance timing and more. They're driven by Selenium running the Chrome browser, as I mentioned, and allows you to kind of straighten multiple actions together. And so for that one, I was going to actually kind of bring up the Swing login monitor I mentioned. So for those of you who worked in Swing, it's kind of a beast at times. But this monitor will actually pull up the page, log into it, verify that it gets some widgets and stuff off the page, and then log out. And it runs, I think, every 10 or 15 minutes. 15 minutes from a variety of data centers. And this then will, if it encounters a failure, which we'll get into alerting here in a moment, it will notify the various groups, including app support, so that they can be aware that there might be an issue and to at least keep an eye out for it. The script itself is quite a bit larger than the one we looked at for WeatherVane. And it does have credentials in here. There's no way around that. Just be aware. So don't put a super protected account into a synthetic. But basically, it's just connecting. And you can see that here. I'm not going to go too much into syntax today. Looking for form elements, logging into said form elements, looking for the display name, and clicking log out. Again, not particularly complicated, but that's far more than you would get with just a simple browser test, because a browser test might go to Swing and say, yep, I'm getting a 200. It's up and running. Even if you check for the text of the login, you may go, yep, the login form's there. But when you actually try to perform the login action, something fails. The LDAP integration's down, or any number of other things. This type of monitor can detect that, that the other types cannot. And that's kind of a key distinction for why you may want to start using synthetics for some of your stuff. Moving on next, we've got alerting. And my mouse over here is wrong. There we go. I think everyone knows what alerting is, so I'll kind of be brief. You can, of course, fire off alerts on synthetic tests. The basic condition is, hey, the monitor failed, so let's sound out a notification. A failure in this case means that the synthetic itself returned or asserted false, timed out, or otherwise did not end successfully. When that happens, New Relic actually silently fires off the exact same test 2 more times immediately from the exact same data center location. And if all 3 of those tests report failures, then it counts the monitor itself as failed and sends out the alert. That's to prevent the occasional network error or system glitch from waking up the poor support folks in the middle of the night. And the key part is also from the same location. So your monitor may start failing from, say, Atlanta, but is working fine from DC. That could indicate a geographic specific issue, which we've certainly had in the past when a level 3 ISP goes down. For alerting, we can send it out to a variety of channels: email, Slack, PagerDuty, Status Page IO, more. There's even a Jira integration available, but we are not currently using it. And back to the WeatherVane thing I mentioned, WeatherVane has one of these alerts. There are multiple criteria in here. You'll see these are all APM application metric. That's just the server itself. The key one up here is the synthetic monitor failure. In the event that API check we looked at fails, it's going to send out a notification to these 6 channels. App support, the CMG performance channel in Slack. It's going to send off an email to status page and update status page, emails performance, and does 2 things on PagerDuty as well. So, right off the bat, we can see how this would help. But not only that, it's configured so that if the API check fails, we send out a runbook URL, which is a link to the WeatherVane support and troubleshooting documentation. It's included right there in the alert notification. So if you've got a runbook or you're thinking about creating one, you can embed it in your alert policy and help whoever's on call know where to get started, rather than them just waking up at 3 a.m. and going, why is my phone going off? But let's say you don't just want an alert if a monitor fails. You want to do something more complex. So for example, you want to know if the page weight of one of your pages has changed by more than 25% in 6 hours, or you want to alert when a specific ad runs. I have no idea why, but I'm just kind of throwing things out there. You could do that stuff too, but it requires some NRQL or New Relic query language. It's a SQL-like language that's used for reports, alerts, and more complex functionality than New Relic. If you can write a select statement in SQL, you can write NRQL, except there are no joins. So yeah. But as cool as NRQL-based alerts are, they're outside the scope of today's talk. If you want to dive into them more, hit me up afterwards. Check out the New Relic docs. There is a lot you can do there. We're barely leveraging this functionality at the moment. And now for a fun one, debugging. We're getting a little fancy here. Let's say you've got a problem reported by a user on a regular basis and you just can't seem to reproduce it. You kind of know where it's happening, but you don't know every single detail of what's happening. Set up a synthetic and watch the page. You might catch what you're looking for and save yourself some headaches. Or maybe there's a problem that only occurs at, say, 3 a.m. when the data feed refreshes and WeatherVane's data gets out of date by 4 hours. No one wants to test things at 3 a.m. because we like to sleep. So write a synthetic test to do it. Yeah, you can actually schedule them to only run at certain times with maintenance windows. Same deal. We have synthetics pointed at the swing staging environment and the method staging environments, which go down every night and every weekend to save cost. And we have maintenance windows so those synthetics don't run during that time period and send out false positives. It's kind of handy. Or maybe, let's say, you're getting ready to roll out some major functionality or design changes like improvements to mobile newspaper stories, and you'd like to get an idea of how much of a performance benefit you're going to get. Running a few tests yourself is not great. I mean, it's good to do as a starting point, but not to develop your final numbers. Because first off, we're all human, and humans have biases. You want your new stuff to be better, so it might feel better, even if it's not. And we can't measure feelings and put them in a report for BALA. It just does not work. Somebody's tried, I'm sure. So instead, you decide to run some one-off tests with Lighthouse, and that's great. You ran, what, 5, 10 tests? Maybe you got crazy and ran 50. But if you've done statistics, you know that that's not enough of a sample size to draw any kind of reasonable conclusions from. So write a synthetic test and run hundreds or thousands of tests, and then make a nice pretty dashboard to show it off side by side with your old page. Quantify your improvements, and also identify areas where you still have work to do. We actually just did this for the Mobile First Story page project for newspaper and learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work, and produced tons of data for them to kind of help guide the next phases of the project. If you'd like to give that a shot for your next rollout, hit me up with the performance team and let's talk. We can get something going for that. And here's one that I bet not a lot of people have thought about previously: competitive analysis. Company out there, as I'm sure we all know, and it's good to know what the other companies are doing. Did they roll out a new design? How did it affect their page load times? How heavy are their stories compared to ours? How have we changed over time versus them? You can set up some synthetics, let them run and record months of data, and then you can put it in a fancy dashboard like, say, one right over here that looks at average load times of ABC, NBC News, AJC, WHIO, the size of the response body. You can limit it to certain markets, like just Austin newspapers. and kind of keep track of this and go back months worth of data and keep track of these things over time and see how they're evolving, how we're evolving. So that's great, right? Wrong. These monitors are great for getting you an idea of what's happening, but they are never a replacement for true competitive analysis. They're a tool that's available, and we should definitely use them. So if there are product owners out there and you like something like this, let's talk. Devs, if you think this is useful, talk to your manager and product owner. We have this going for several different things already, and we'd be happy to expand it because more data is generally good, but you have to know, what to use and when to use it. So like I said, it's going to be pretty short. So, at this point, now what? I'm kind of hoping that some of you at least are getting excited about synthetics, and maybe you want to start some on your own. Maybe you're thinking, hey, how am I going to get started? Or maybe I'm just asking that rhetorically as a narrative device to push my presentation along. But we're going to talk about it anyway. So here's what you need to write New Relic Synthetics. You ready? You need a modern web browser. I've used Chrome and Firefox. I'm pretty sure Edge and IE work fine, but I haven't actually personally tried them. You need basic knowledge of JavaScript, as well as an idea of how to use Google or your favorite search engine. And that's it. Really, there's no fancy editors. There's nothing to install. There's no overhead to get started. If you can write JavaScript and operate a form page, you're ready to go. But I hate JavaScript, somebody might be thinking, including me. You know what? Get over it. JavaScript is not going anywhere, sorry. If you're a back-end dev like me who looks at JavaScript and goes, well, that's something, there's a Selenium Builder plugin for Firefox, and it can save you a ton of trouble. And I'll pull it up here in a second. What you do is you turn it on. It records your page actions. Everything you click on, everything you type. You can even set it to track your mouse and what you mouse over. Then you can export it to a number of formats. For Selenium Grid, maybe you're running a PHP version. It'll export the PHP tests or the Python tests. Or somebody wrote a cool community-maintained plugin for exporting New Relic synthetic tests, of course. Then you've got some basic code, and you just get to tweak it in a decent format instead of staring at a blank editor and going, where the heck do I start on this stuff? It's not the prettiest code in the world. You may have spotted some of it in most synthetics we were looking at, because frankly, I use it. And the JavaScript aficionados may look at that and go, wow, that is something. But you know what? It works, and that's all that really matters in this case. Or if you're over this and you don't have the time, or you just don't want to deal with it, you can open up the story for performance, take a look at it, and write it. So kind of one of the things we're here to do. The caveat is we can't guarantee a delivery time frame because everybody's got priorities, so you have to fit into a schedule. Giving us more notice would help, or you can always set your manager against ours in a battle royale and see who comes out on top. And as promised, let me pull up the Firefox plugin real quick. And I have no idea what page it's going to go to. Nothing. Awesome. So, we just pull up a page right here. We kick off the plugin, which I use the keyboard shortcut because I'm used to it. You just tell it to record. And as you start doing things, they appear over here. Look, set element text in that field. And nobody's going to care if they see the super secure password that is not secure in the least. And especially if I don't type it right. And again, so we'll record that too. And over here, you'll see, all my stuff is going on. There's where I mistyped it. There's where the correct version is. You noted that I pressed enter to open the form instead of clicking on it, whereas up here I clicked it. Here on the page, I could tell it I want to do a, record a verification. I go over here and I click on this. And it's now added a step in for verify text present for automation testing account. And then I can click log out. And all that's been noted here. And then I can stop the recording, hit file, export, and I have the plugin installed here for New Relic Synthetics. And when I do that, I pick a place to save it, and boom, I'm done. The raw format is pretty simple. I'll pull it up real quick. We're going to look at Emacs because I like to. Back. What I call the darn thing. Oh, I'll do the MP story one instead. So, it'll output a script similar to this. One browser, please. Thank you. So, real quick, you just go in here and edit it. Or, let's say you just want to get in and dive into it. You can do that here, over here in synthetics. Just click Add New, and we'll do a scripted browser real quick. Give it a name, give it a place to run from, and set the schedule. I know I'm going quickly on all this. This literally is stuff you will have to determine on your own for what makes sense for your test. The important thing here, one is just write the script page. This is a semi-intelligent WYSIWYG editor. They do have some syntax highlighting. They have some helpers like an IDE would. So, as I click through, you can see various elements and whatnot. It does basic error checking as well. So if this is how you like to code, go ahead and code here. I like to code in Emacs and paste it in. That works too. And then click Validate, and it'll actually run your test before you save it up. And otherwise, click Create Monitor, and you're done. And that kind of covers everything that I wanted to talk about today. And that's the wrong window. So I'll go ahead and open it up to questions.
Hey, Nathan, I have a few questions, but let's see if anyone else has any questions, because I don't want to talk the whole.
No, sure.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and we'll see if anyone.
Go for it.
That plugin that you use to export the action.
The synthetic.
The synthetic actions.
Yep.
Does it have a JavaScript option as well?
Oh yeah. Share my screen again.
And what's the difference between the JavaScript export and the synthetic export?
So let's do the file export here, and we can obviously do any number of different formats. In here, I think one of the node there's Selenium WebDriver right there. The New Relic synthetics version targets the New Relic specific wrapper plugin. So for example, if I go back over to here at Emacs, you'll see that in some of my code, I'm using this wait for and find element. This is not a standard WebDriver code. This is something that New Relic added in. And so the plugin understands that and exports to use it. And won't use any of the functionality that is present in WebDriver that New Relic has kind of wrapped off. So that's really the only difference for it. If you are happy doing JavaScript, do it in JavaScript and just tweak it to your heart's content.
Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Okay. Can you go back to the page where you had all the different news medias, comparing them to PC? I noticed that
that's not the right one. That's the wrong one. There you go.
I noticed that APC has the lowest number. What is that number? The duration of page load, or?
Yeah, let's see what this one is. Yep, it looks like this is doing the average duration of the page load. I'd have to dig into the synthetic to see specifically what it's loading, which we could certainly do if you wanted to. But yeah, the insights query here is very simple. It's just pulling up the average duration and labeling that as AJC.
You said you're not sure what page is loading, so we don't know if it's a home page or a random.
Not offhand, but I'll just go over here real quick, and I will pull.
That was pretty good. Like the APC load seems like it was way below all the other sites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually kind of one of the reasons I showed that off, because it does look good. So this is a synthetic we were just talking about. It's called AJ. Oh, that's the key thing. This is the AMP version of the monitor. So this is specifically we're doing this for the AMP pages, and this is just hitting the AJC, a specific sports story, the AMP layout specifically.
And what about the other sites? Are they also AMP versions, or are they regular versions of this?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, this is an AMP industry comparison that Jesse set up, and I'm pretty sure that all these are hitting different AMP pages. I'll pull up one other one just to kind of double check, because if it's not, obviously that is not a fair comparison, and we want to be fair to our competitors, even if we don't like them all the time. And so, this is just the unique ID for the monitor. There are lots of ways to do this. I'm doing it just to kind of get things through quickly. Yeah, this is a CBS AMP monitor. It's hitting a specific story, and I think it's on one of their AMP layouts. Yeah. Yep, there it is. So yeah, we're hitting AMP pages for them as well.
Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. That's good to see.
Yep.
Let's see. The other question I have is, so the synthetics without the alerts are pretty much just automation tests, right?
Yes, they're just automation tests. Oh, and you just reminded me. So, yeah, you don't have to send out an alert if you don't want to. Obviously, you have to ask yourself, why are you doing it then? For the MFSP project, like I mentioned, we were doing it to collect data. So, I just ran the synthetics, and I can go over here, and I can see weeks worth of data comparing production versus QA versus the old version of the story on QA. And I don't want to alert on this. I don't care if it goes down or whatever. Well, I guess I care a little bit, but I mainly want to see what the numbers look like. And so that's why we would run these as an automation test.
Oh, I see. I see. So, project to add cases, add scenarios to synthetics does not in any way interfere or does not conflict with our automation, because we have an automation team, and
Yep.
they build automation for.
Oh yeah, and I've worked with. Yep, and I've worked with Bedney several times. So for example, the swing tests that I've written are completely based off of what the automation team does, because their tests are very solid and they're better than mine. The problem is that they have access to the full power of Selenium Grid and all the stuff that WebDriver does that New Relic Synthetics does not. So there are limitations there. And so we're using them to Relic and monitor and alert and maybe kind of generate performance data over and over and over again, but not to fully replace QA, because it can't.
Oh, okay. And what about code sharing or library sharing? Is there any way that that's possible between the performance team and the automation team?
Yeah, I'd be happy to show it to you, but frankly, the automation team is going to be very disappointed in the code that we have, because ours is very simple. That text box that I showed you is literally all that you have access to. You cannot save a library and call it up from someplace else. You cannot import. You can't even have like a shared set of variables for logins and whatnot. You have to duplicate all of that code. And so while they have this fantastic, wonderful structure set up for inheritance and code reuse, I can't use any of that here in New Relic. And so, yeah, I've talked about it. Again, there's something here that you look at and that's terrible. And I go, yes, it is. But it has limitations.
How can you modify this code outside of this, the New Relic page? Is there like a backend repo that you can use? Is there like a?
There is not. It was really kind of designed for a DevOps or a monitoring type perspective, and so no, it does not have a kind of a code repo or anything like that. Obviously, for scripts that we maintain at CMG, we'll want to put them into GitLab or something like that. But there's no automated hookup. You have to paste things in and maintain kind of your own copies of it.
Oh, I see. I see.
Mm-hmm.
Who else is involved with this? Is this all the performance team does? Well, sorry, what I meant was, does you only do this, or do you expect other teams to contribute, or how do?
So it really depends on each team. So Dan Cobb, for example, of our newspaper, is extremely fluent with synthetics and New Relic in general. So he has a number of scripts that he's written in here for ad monitoring. He actually has things in here that will time on a per ad slot basis on, say, AJC. Other teams, I think the CMG Verticals has some stuff in there that they've written themselves to test as well. So it is open and people are free to get in here if they have New Relic access. However, we also know that not everybody has the time or the comfort to do it. So we do offer that as an option for us to do it as well.
Oh, okay. Okay. Cool. That's all the questions I had. Anyone else have any questions? Anyone on? One thing I want to mention, there are people who are on YouTube, watching this on YouTube, and we're not able to communicate through the Hangout. If you guys want to talk through the IRC, through Slack, or even email, send it to me. I'll ask them from Nathan.
Excellent. One thing I did want to show, and I forgot to put it in my notes, is I mentioned that synthetics do have a maintenance cost. And that's partially because they are actually decoupled from the normal development process. So for example, I have a monitor over, not that one, this monitor here. This is a Swing search monitor that I wrote. The idea is it logs into Swing, performs a search, makes sure it gets results back in a timely manner, and logs out. Very simple monitor. However, at some point after the Swing 3 upgrade, something changed and the monitor started failing. So now I have to go back in and kind of figure out what changed and adjust my code appropriately. And that's just something you have to be aware of with synthetics in general. The automation team has to do it as well. It's just, if you're going to write synthetics, just be aware that as you change your code or whatever you're monitoring changes, your tests are almost certainly going to have to update as well. Whether it's just a simple DOM change or a text change to a complete functionality change, you have to maintain that.
Hey, I was actually wondering, some of the Swing stuff that you have, some of the tests for Swing, could you show us the some of the data? I've always wondered how performance of using Swing compares.
Yeah, so I'm currently working on a test to do publishing times, but that is an insanely complex beast, so it's not done yet. The one that we run most often here is this login. This is the external login page. We have one for internal as well. And I run it at data centers across the US since we've got properties across the US. And this is the last 6 hours worth of data. So, 99.9% update time over the past 30 days, not too bad. It is sending out alerts as we showed. And you can kind of see, here's the slowest results. We've got one here from Portland. And let's say you actually wanted to kind of dive into this. What do I want to know, why is this slow? Well, this is actually one place where synthetics is really useful. You can click into it and get a full timing diagram, HAR, of the login process or whatever you did. By default, it's timeline. You can switch it over to duration. You can kind of filter it down if you just want to see the errors, if you just want to see the JavaScript, so on and so forth. These buttons here are for each URL it hits. So in this case, it's hitting the main index. It does a couple AJAX calls, and it hits the index again as far as the synthetic's concerned. And you can kind of dive into this. What was this JavaScript doing? Well, there's your response time. There's the response headers themselves, the request headers. You can get a query to run this in Insights if you really, really want to. And you have the ability to set your own custom attributes as well. And this one does because of, again, the Selenium Builder output. Anytime I log something, it logs it as a custom attribute. Not terribly useful in this case, but here it is. So you can see that when this call got entered, it took 804 milliseconds. You can put whatever data you want to in there. If you want to store the username, do it. This is literally just a key value pairing. And I think you got 25 or 30 per script. So you have option there. Or trying to figure out what's going on, you have a complete script log here. This is what your code output. I don't know what all those diamonds are. That's amazing. But this is the console log of the script that I wrote, just outputting stuff here. So you can see there's my timing data. I can use this to kind of track this down. Not good enough? You have a browser log here. So you can really get into detail on what the synthetics are doing if you're looking for failures or successes. So I've had, let's go back. I think I had a failure yesterday. Oh, earlier this morning. So I had a task that timed out here. It happens from time to time, network. You can see it timed out waiting for this element to be visible. And in the case of this, I have it set up to take a screenshot when it fails. So I can click and, well, the login page is there. So I don't know why this would have failed. I would have to kind of go in and do some additional triaging. But if you've got a simpler application, you can use screenshots to kind of help you with that guidance. Okay, this failed because it couldn't see this form element. Did the page not load? Am I missing CSS? Did this JavaScript not do its thing? What's going on? And you really have all this. And this is one of the areas that's nice, is because this data lives for 13 months, give or take. And you just can come in here and do your kind of your triaging and debugging as part of your ongoing development process.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Are there any cool results that you got from the mobile first story page tests?
Yeah, I think so. Let me pull up some of those. We did run into some interesting things. I'm going to about them as they are truly interesting from a technical perspective. So a lot of these, for example, you'll see that the times are strange. And that's actually because this is a synthetic test, and it's only as smart as the code itself. And so one of the interesting things that Livefire does is it holds a connection open in the background so that it will notify the user when new comments pop up. That's awesome. It's a handy feature. It's a valid thing to do with a WebSocket. The synthetic test sees that the page is not fully loaded. So if I take the average duration on this stuff, I go, oh, wow, this looks terrible. But that's not true. The page was loaded. It was perfectly operational very quickly, but the synthetic didn't understand that. So you have to, don't just take everything at face value. Use your brain just like you would for any kind of normal development. But in terms of some interesting things, let me pull back up this dashboard here. Oh, no, I'm pulling up a different dashboard. Because I gave him a different one that I like better.
Well, I didn't know Livefile does that it keeps the connection open using WebSockets or something possible.
Yeah, I did not know it either.
Yeah, a lot of good information.
So this was something. Yep, this was something that this looks weird, and was one of those things you're like, this does not make sense. But we've checked it over and over again, and it seems to be true. If you look here in production, I have 2 lines. This synthetic is designed to load the page twice. It loads it once on cold cache, and then it records the time, and then it loads it immediately again with a warm browser cache. Because when you fire up a synthetic, it is spinning up a brand new VM. There is no history whatsoever, no cookies, no data, nothing. So if you want to do a warm cache, you have to load it multiple times. Well, we wanted to see, what effect is browser caching having on the page. And if you look at production here, the repeat page loads in yellow are sometimes longer than the first page loads. And you'd think, that doesn't make any sense. And we looked at the script over and over again, ran some tests independently, and actually that is true. In certain cases, the repeat page load is coming back longer than the first page load. And so, we were able to kind of track that down. It's not something that you would just understand or think about necessarily when you're, just kind of playing around. Or, we were able to dig into some more detail. So on this specific story, and we have the same story running in production QA, and in QA we have it both run with new FSP design and the old, so we can really do a true apples-to-apples comparison. And when possible, we're including the real user data as well. But we're able to drill down here and go, what are our slowest things? So just right here off the synthetics, I can see that, over the past day, this domain, ebdr3.com, on average, was taking 2 seconds to load every single time. Is that something I'm concerned about? Or, I've got this asset here from, I'm guessing that's an ad. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. Duration of 31 seconds. You start looking at things like that and you go, does that, is that something that we're comfortable with? Does this make sense? And start digging into that and kind of using that to kind of target where you want to go to next. And so, yeah, those are kind of some of the more interesting type of things that we found on this project.
All right, awesome. I'm out of all my questions. Does anyone else have any questions? Anyone on watching on YouTube, or want to type any questions in Slack? If not, then I guess we can call it a day. And thanks, Nathan, so much for that informative, very educational presentation.
I have a
like I said, if anybody's got
very quick question. So I noticed that all the displays.
Oh, go for it.
Oh no, that's because you're on YouTube. Yeah, sorry about that. So I noticed that all the displays, they use colors to denote different sites and whatnot. Can you change that for for someone who's colorblind? Is that?
Unfortunately, no. And I'm slightly visually impaired, so that is on my list. It is actually something I've reported to New Relic as a feature request. We do not have any control over the display. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. All right, that was my question.
That is a valid question. I bring that kind of stuff up all the time because people do not think about 501c compliance. And they're aware of our request for it.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, as I said, if anybody comes up with some other questions later or wants to, play around with this and doesn't have access, just let us know. If you need New Relic access because you don't have it, I think just putting in the service now ticket will get routed to us and we'll get you access. If you just want to get in there and play around, go for it. If you don't have access to play around in there, let us know and we'll double check some things. If you've got some stuff that you might want to have tested, let's kind of sit down and talk about it. There's lots of options out there, especially for things like API monitors. Those have a really low cost to develop because they don't have the front-end animation complexities of like an actual web page. And you can get really quick results, especially for monitoring and alerting.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much. And I guess is someone unmuted? Does someone want to take?
Oh yeah. Actually, I did think of something else. So recently we updated one of our files, and that kind of threw our icon codes out the window for half of our icons. So I want to know, would it be possible to set up a, I guess, essentially a test for that? Assuming we provided, the icon codes and all that good stuff.
I mean, theoretically, if we can pull up the data in some kind of plain text format, I don't want to have to do graphics parsing, then yeah, we could set up a monitor for that kind of thing.
Awesome, cool. That's good to know. I will start looking into that. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know about here, but I know at a previous company we ran into an issue where we redid a sprite map and completely screwed stuff up. And it's harder to monitor a sprite map, but an icon code, especially if it's like a key value mapping, is pretty darn simple to keep an eye on.
Oh, sweet, excellent.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Thanks Nathan. And remember that this is recorded, so if anyone wants to watch this again, I can send a link. We have a link for all the tea time and all the espresso talks. All right. Well, have a great weekend, everyone, and bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.